There comes a point where your mind can't carry you any further. You've thought about it from every angle. You've tried to explain your feelings. You've searched for the right words. And still, something doesn't move. Because some of the biggest shifts in your life don't happen when you finally understand. They happen when understanding stops. They happen in the strange moment when the mind goes quiet. Not because it found the answer, but because it reached its limit. And in that silence, something else begins to show itself. Not a theory, not a concept, but a direct recognition. And once that happens, everything changes. Most people have been trained to believe that clarity comes through more thought, more analysis, more interpretation, more mental effort. So when life starts feeling strange, heavy, or disconnected, the first instinct is to understand it, to solve it mentally, to turn it into something manageable. But there are moments in life where the mind itself becomes the barrier. Not because the mind is evil, not because thought is useless, but because thought has limits. And when you come to the edge of those limits, you are standing at the doorway of something deeper. In this video, we're going to talk about that moment, when your need to understand begins to fall apart, and a different kind of seeing begins. Not through force, not through effort, but through direct recognition. What changes in that moment is not just what you know, it's how you exist. The mind feels safe when it can label things. If you can explain why you feel off, you feel a little more in control. If you can define your pain, organize your confusion, or frame your spiritual longing in clean language, it feels like progress. And sometimes it is. But the mind has a hidden habit. It believes that if it can understand something, it has touched the truth of it. That's the illusion. Because explanation is not the same as contact. You can explain love and still be closed off. You can explain presence and still be absent. You can explain spiritual truth and still live from tension, fear, and separation. This is why so many people know so much, yet still feel disconnected. Their mind is full, but their being is untouched. And eventually life starts cornering you into this realization. You can feel it when you've read all the books, watched all of the videos, listened to all of the teachings, and still something in you quietly says, I'm still not there. That frustration matters, because it begins to reveal that the mind cannot enter what is only available through direct seeing. There is usually a moment where your normal way of functioning begins to fail. Maybe you're sitting alone after a long day, trying to figure out why nothing feels right anymore. Maybe you're in the middle of an argument and suddenly realize you're not even reacting to the person in front of you. You're reacting to a pattern. Maybe you're lying in bed, exhausted, unable to think your way back into peace. This is the breaking point. Not dramatic on the outside, but deep on the inside. Because what's actually breaking is your trust in thought as the thing that will save you. And at first, that can feel terrifying. The mind doesn't like losing authority. It doesn't like reaching its limit. It doesn't like not knowing. So when thought stops working, many people panic. They think they're falling apart. But often, what feels like collapse is the beginning of honesty. You are starting to see that your constant interpreting has not brought you home. That recognition hurts, but it's clean. It is the moment false certainty starts losing its grip. Then comes the gap. A brief pause. A silence. A moment where the machinery of explanation slows down. And in that gap, something unusual happens. You don't become smarter. You don't gain a new belief. You don't suddenly assemble the perfect spiritual sentence. You just see. You notice the room, your breath, the fact that awareness is here before the next thought appears, the fact that something in you is present even when the mind has nothing useful to say. This is subtle, so subtle that most people miss it, because they are trained to look for fireworks, not stillness. They are trained to look for answers, not immediacy. They are trained to chase meaning, not notice presence. But this gap is sacred, because it shows you that reality does not disappear when understanding pauses. In fact, for the first time, reality may feel closer. And this is where the monad begins to be recognized, not as an idea to adopt, but as a silent wholeness that was here before your explanation started, and remains after they stop. Not separate from you, not far away, not something mystical in the sense of unreachable. It is the underlying presence that does not need the mind's permission to exist. Once this begins to be seen, your relationship with life starts to change. Not because all your problems vanish, not because you become emotionally numb, but because you are no longer filtering every moment through the demand to mentally grasp it first. You begin to experience life more directly. A hard conversation is still hard, but there is more space around it. A wave of sadness still comes, but it no longer defines the whole field. A moment of uncertainty still arises, but it is not instantly turned into an identity crisis. This is what changes in real life. You stop trying to dominate experience through understanding. You start allowing experience to be seen as it is. And strangely, this makes you more grounded, not less. Because when the mind stops compulsively interfering, you begin responding instead of constantly reacting. You listen more clearly. You feel more honestly. You speak with less performance. You stop building so much tension around needing everything to make sense immediately. And that's a major shift. Because most suffering is not just pain. It's pain plus resistance. Confusion plus panic. Emotion plus the desperate need to explain it away. When that extra layer loosens, life opens. This is the deepest part. When understanding stops being your main anchor, you begin to recognize that what you are is not the stream of thought trying to keep reality organized. What you are is prior to that. Still here before the interpretation. Still here during the confusion. Still here after the mind runs out of language. This is why everything changes. Not because the world turns magic overnight, but because the false center begins to lose its throne. You stop living as if you are the only one who thinks, labels, and defends. You start recognizing the deeper field in which all of that appears. That deeper field is not distant. It's not theoretical. It is what has been here the whole time. The monad is not reached through perfect understanding. It is recognized when the noise of separation softens enough for what has always been whole to become obvious. And once even a glimpse of that happens, you can't fully return to the old way of living. You may still get caught in thought. You may still overanalyze. You may still forget. But something inside of you knows. You know the mind is not the whole story anymore. And that changes the way you walk, speak, relate, suffer, and return. So, if you're in a season where nothing makes sense the way it used to, don't rush to fill that space too quickly. Don't assume that confusion means you're failing. Don't assume that the loss of mental certainty means something has gone wrong. You may be standing in one of the most important thresholds of your life. The moment you stop understanding is not always the moment you lose the path. Sometimes, it's the moment the false path ends. And what remains is quieter, deeper, and more real than anything the mind could construct. Not because you figured it out, but because for a moment, you stop standing between yourself and what has always been here. If this journey spoke to you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone ready to experience life beyond thought. Comment below. Have you ever had a moment where the mind went quiet and something deeper became obvious? I read every comment. If you would like to support my work directly, you can do so at buymeacoffee.com/magnumopus333. Or you can explore some original merchandise at my Teespring store online. The link is in the description below. Remember, your consciousness is the key that unlocks reality. Let's keep unlocking it together. Thank you for watching. Until next time.